Hi guys, how's it? Kia ora, te me kiwi whanau, good day to everyone else. Howdy, 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 once again from Texas. Another hot day, another video. So we find ourselves in a little bit of a weird time. We have another week until international rugby kicks off in the Rugby Championship, the best rugby comp outside of the Rugby World Cup, in this commentator's personal opinion. You can go through all my videos, no question that I love Southern Hemisphere rugby. And I thought, I've done opinion videos, I've talked about other sports, I've shown you guys going to like college football games, going to ice hockey games, and kind of talked about my life a little bit outside of it. And I thought, hey man, here's a perfect opportunity to talk about something that I've probably watched about 1 million times, and that is a rugby documentary. The film in particular that I'm going to be talking about today is 2015's Pacific Warriors. It's about 1 hour and 33 minutes long, narrated by the great Sir Brian Cox. My North American followers would know him from Super Troopers. He was the chief, the sergeant over the ragtag mob of highway patrolmen. And me personally, for him portraying one of the greatest screenwriters I've ever thought, Robert McKee, in the film adaptation with Nicolas Cage. I don't know about my international followers. I do know my US followers. You can get this film currently absolutely free with commercials via Amazon Prime right now. Get on there, look it up. I'll leave the link to the IMDb page so you guys can kind of check it out. And I just thought, hey, it's one of my favorite rugby documentaries, and I thought I would talk a little bit about it. And maybe you've never seen it, and maybe you want to see it, or maybe this will make you see it. So obviously, Pacific Warriors, I got my Tonga hoodie up, I got my Tonga flag up, it's my Tokos. I always talk proudly about the Tongan national rugby team. That would probably be, as far as national sides, they would definitely be in my top there. Obviously, Springboks #1. I love my USA Eagles because I do live in the United States. But I've got this special place in my heart for the Sea Eagle. Not Tongan by any means, not even Pacific Islander. I just have a love for that team and the people of Tonga. Always the nicest people I've ever met. Really thick accents when you meet them fresh off the island. Fobs, as they call them in New Zealand or Australia. But just the nicest people and a really, really proud rugby tradition. Obviously, qualifying most recently, beating Hong Kong, qualifying for the Rugby World Cup, bringing in guys finally with Rugby Union, World Rugby, changing the rules, being able to see guys like Israel Folau play for Tonga, guys who were born there, guys like Malakai Fekitoa, former All Black center, currently playing in Europe, getting to finally get that cap for the nation that he was born in. Charles Pititau, all these guys finally getting chances to play for either the nation they were born in or the nation their parents were born in. And I think this is a really good rule that World Rugby changed. And granted, I don't think it's going to really turn any heads come Rugby World Cup time, but for me, being a fan of these Pacific Island nations, it's so good to see these guys getting caps for, either, like I said, the nation they were born in or the nation their parents are from. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. I even left a comment on the Tonga Rugby Union Instagram talking about, look at all these young bucks getting their first caps, and it's guys like Malakai and Israel who are well into their 30s getting their first caps for the Sea Eagle, the mighty Sea Eagle. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Like I said, narrated by Sir Brian Cox. Having such major stars, and a lot of these are going to be throwback stars, and I'll tell you why as drag it down to the end of the cast. Guys like Serge Betsen, the French former French player, Matt Gateau, the Aussie / LA Giltini, has a little bit role in there. Samoans Pat Lam, talking about obviously Pat was born in New Zealand, played for Samoa in the early 90s through the 90s. Fereti Tualagi, that would be the current Tualagi playing for England. That would be the oldest sibling there. All of Tuolagi's siblings all played for Samoa. He's the only one, Manu Tualagi, the only current one playing for England. And Mike Umaga, you would probably know his brother more, Tana Umaga, the former All Blacks captain, legend. Now he's into the coaching world, coaching Pacific Island teams and whatnot. English greats, such as my favorite English player of all time, Johnny Wilkinson. Nick Easter, also from that same era, that early 2000, that late 2005, 2010 era. Jason Robinson, the former Wigan League player who turned to rugby union to represent England. And their coach, Sir Clive Woodward, the 2003 Rugby World Cup winner there for England. Fiji, you get guys like Nicky Little, born in New Zealand. His uncle, Walter Little, was an All Black. I think he had 50 caps for the All Blacks, and brings up, hey, you kind of think you're going to make it, and then you end up just having to go and play. I think he had a Maori mom and a Fijian dad, or a Maori dad and a Fijian mom, or something like that, and that's how he was able to play for Fiji. Still their leading scorer of all time. And they do bring up Rapeni Kaukau. If any of you guys don't know who that is, probably one of the best rugby players in history that had a very limited career. English was not his first language, and he did kind of get done wrong by, I think, some of the people. We could talk about that in another video. The enforcer himself, Bakkies Botha, the one South African who is in the documentary, and really the stars of the documentary, the main star that you see the most of on screen, Epi Tione, former Tongan center, wing, fullback, couldn't kick very well, lock, loose four. I mean, it's said in the documentary that one day they're going to find his skull and think God's walked amongst us when he was just an island boy walking around. You get Epi Tione, you get Nili Latu, former captain, the Tongan Torpedo, Haley T-Pole, another one of those, I think, former Highlander as well right there. Finn Almaka has a bit role into it. Pierre Hola, that whole 2007, and that's really what this documentary is really centered around, is the 2007 Rugby World Cup held in France as we prepare to return to France next year for the next World Cup. And really around Pacific Islanders, chiefly Tonga being the smallest of the three, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and their history in the sport. And really not just their history, but like, how did they get there? They migrated across water, some of the biggest open migration in history. And you have to think, to find these pinpricks and the largest thing in the world. The largest thing in the world is the Pacific Ocean. Any of us who have taken those trans-Pacific flights can attest to that. It is it's a third of the planet. And you have to think that the guys, the seafarers that found those places, they had to be very strong. And how eventually foreigners showed up, and then the British showed up with their flag and their religion and their sport. And obviously these large Pacific Islanders took to the sport as it was a way of maybe not killing your enemy, but having a good go at them. And just kind of the influence of the sport on it as a whole. You look at teams like England that have quite a few Pacific Islanders on it. Japan, heaps of Tongans on the squad. The biggest one that we could honestly say, the All Blacks. Yeah, that's a lot of Pacific Island in that. And I'm not just talking the Maoris on the team. I'm talking about the Samoans, the Fijians, the Tongans, that all make up that squad. You can go back and look at the All Black squads prior to 1980, and they were predominant, even into the mid-80s, up to the 87 Cup. Predominantly Pakeha. For those of you that know what Pakeha is, this is a white European in New Zealand. This is the Maori word for white European. I've actually been told it means pig, but don't quote me on that one. But you see how they really influence the game. And for me, I think the other big part that I do love about Pacific Island rugby, and it is brought up by Bakkies Botha, is that they play a very physical style of rugby. It's not a lot of this kicking. It's take the ball, run it up the gut. No fear rugby. And it's absolutely, I hate to think of the sport without the Pacific Island influence. And even the USA Eagles, we have heaps of Pacific Islanders on the team. And I hate to think about where the game would be without that influence. And I also think that South Africans, like I said, Bakkies Botha, he loves playing against them because they played that physical style of game. And it even talks about like the Sipi Tau and the CB and like all the Civitao and all this, Bakkies Botha brings it up. It's nothing like seeing that and getting ready, and you get chills on your spine, ready for that first contact after the kickoff. And yeah, it's a really, that's what I say. The big thing about this documentary is that 2007 World Cup, what Epi Tione did to bring the team together there for the World Cup. He brings up their entire budget for the tournament was like England's laundry budget. Like, they were sleeping on floors. They were practicing in parks. They were doing trainings in public parks. You'd rock up to Australia's trainings and there'd be 5,000 people watching them, and there'd be some lady walking their dog at the Tongan one. But they had a really, really great tournament that year, Tonga. That pool that they were in was the pool of death. It was England, who was the former champion from '03. The almighty Springboks. You had Samoa and USA. That's what made up their pool. And they beat the USA 25-15, I believe. They beat Samoa in a very physical game where you had Epi Tione with a yellow card and, unfortunately, Haley Tipole getting the red card. There's an interesting little anecdote about that in the film as well. And, almost beating the Springboks in that pool game. They had to bring on their run-ons because Andreas... Oh, God. Pistorius, I think was his last name, who was playing fly half for the Springboks. It was kind of their B squad. Was shanking kicks left and right. The Tongans were beating them. Ruan Pinar comes on, finally scores at like the 18th minute for the Springboks. Yes, Ruan is still playing, guys. He plays for the Cheetahs. Fred Stain was on that team, still playing, obviously, has gotten the call up for the Rugby Championship. But, you see that 2007 Rugby World Cup side that the Springboks had, it brings up them completely annihilating and keeping England scoreless in that pool game. They were hitting top form, and obviously they went on to win the entire shebang-a-bang awesomely. It was a great tournament for the Springboks. But really, just like I said, the documentary really just covers Pacific Island rugby, the influence, and then kind of like where do we go moving forward. And the film ends, like I said, an hour and 33 minutes. It ends with Epi Tione saying probably one of like the things that kind of, even though I am a very much a white guy, kind of brings a tear to my eye. And he was like, maybe one day the world will be 100% Pacific Islander, but until then, no matter where we go, just know that a piece of you still lives in the islands. And it's like, yeah, you applaud that because it's like, yeah, dude, like, their ancestors were seafarers and they've been doing the same thing. Like, the biggest export out of Tonga is rugby players. I read an interesting article not too long ago saying that is the country that you have the highest percentage of being a professional athlete in Tonga. There are more Tongans outside of Tonga than there are in Tonga. It's kind of like Puerto Ricans here in this country. There's way more outside of Puerto Rico than there are in Puerto Rico. But like I said, absolutely free to watch this on Amazon Prime. I don't know about my international followers. If you can find something, if you can find it, watch it. It's very, very entertaining to watch, especially, for us Springbok fans because we won that World Cup. But for those of you that like want to see kind of the little guy, they were the smallest union in that tournament, and they got very close to beating the Springboks, who won the whole thing. And they were in the game with England up until like the last 10 or 15 minutes, and then it became an issue of, it's the bench just wasn't. England had a much better bench. Their top players all played starting 15. They don't have anything. And, you just kind of see, and it's the struggles that the Pacific Island teams still have going forward. I mean, Fiji seems to do well, but they're also part of the Commonwealth. Tonga and Samoa continue to struggle financially, and it's unfortunate because they do bring so much, and you look at their influence on the sport, they should probably have a bit more of a say internationally, but unfortunately it doesn't work out like that sometimes, and it's a money thing. It's a money thing. And even Nikki Little says it best in the documentary is that, what would it say if Tonga won the Rugby World Cup? It would say, you don't need 5 doctors. You don't need this coach, this coach, and this coach. You don't need this, and this. You don't need the nicest shoes. You don't need the biggest sponsors. You know what I mean? So like the powers that be are going to keep it the way it is. And there's another documentary that I'll probably do a video later down the line about Samoa, their rugby union done by former Samoan lock Daniel Leo. I'll talk about that probably at some other later time. But yeah, if you have a moment, if you have an hour and a half to kill, you want to watch a good documentary about the sport that talks about the history of the sport and really, like I said, the influence that the Pacific Islanders have had on the game. Check this documentary out. It's totally worth watching. Even if you've got to watch it with commercials, absolutely worth watching. But that's it for this one, guys. We got a week and 2 days, 3 days, till those Springboks welcome those All Blacks to South Africa. I cannot wait. I'm absolutely excited. It's going to be on like Donkey Kong, like a gorilla throwing barrels at an Italian guy. But I will talk to you guys again very soon. Cheers, guys.